As we're all probably painfully aware, the GPU market is absolutely insane right now. Buying a new GPU in stock is now an impossible, and so if you want to get into PC gaming, well, how can you go about that? Well, a good way to start might just be buying a used PC like this one. This is from a long-time patron viewer, Chris, who you can message on the Discord if you want to buy a system from him, but this is a system that would cost you around about £500, and for that you'll get a couple, well, quite a few generation old i5, an R9 390 with 8GB of VRAM, 16GB of RAM, a 240GB SSD and a 1TB hard drive, and in a reasonably stylish case. It even has some real tempered glass. So is it worth buying a used PC? Well, let's talk about that. For your around £500 with this specific system, you can get your hands on an i5 4690K, which is a Devil's Canyon chip from 2014. In fact, I actually went to Intel for the launch of this chip. I was at their offices, and that was fun. But that just gives you an idea of both how long I've been doing YouTube and how relatively old this chip is. Now, I should make it clear that this is a quad-core with 4 threads, and despite the fairly large physical time gap between when this launched and today, because of Intel's general lack of massive changes, it's actually not overly too dissimilar from a chip that you could buy a generation or two ago instead. Ironically, it's also less power hungry, as this only drew 65 watts at peak under full 100% load, which is kind of impressive. Now, you do also have 16GB of DDR3. It's 1600 MHz, and for me this is probably the biggest almost drawback of buying a used system, because if in 6 months or a year or 2 years time you want to upgrade your CPU, well, you're not only going to have to upgrade your CPU and motherboard, but you're also going to have to buy new memory. Whereas buying a system today, or even a couple of generations old, if you can have DDR4 in that system, then at least if you were to go and upgrade, you wouldn't have to upgrade your memory as well. Now, Chris has used a Corsair CX 750W power supply here, which means that if you want to upgrade the CPU and the graphics card later on, that should be plenty fine. You'll have plenty of headroom for power here, and he's even included the extra 8-pin power connectors if you want to add even more power-hungry graphics cards. You get a 240GB SATA SSD and a relatively slow 1TB SATA hard drive. If I was gonna, purchase this build myself, I think the first thing that I would do is replace that hard drive with either a new, faster one, or more likely a Crucial MX500 1TB, which can now be found for anywhere between £60 and £80. There's an Amazon affiliate link in the description below if you're interested, but one of those drives is a SATA SSD that, while it's obviously not the very fastest drive you could ever imagine, it will mean that your system will load faster, your games will load much faster, and I had some stuttering and choppiness in the menu systems, which made it really difficult to set things up, whereas if I swapped that game to the SSD, that went away, so that would also help alleviate that. And then, of course, there is the graphics card. Now, this is an R9 390 with 8GB of VRAM, which actually 8GB of VRAM is a pretty large amount for considering how old this card is. This came out 1 year after the CPU, so 2015. It's based on the GCN 2.0 architecture and is arguably just a rebranded, slightly overclocked R9 290 from a year or two before that. But because it's based on the GCN architecture, you do get access to a number of AMD's features, including things like FreeSync. It's also, while it's not the exactly most power efficient card, it's also not any more power hungry than any of the current GPUs that you can find, so there's a nice balance there of room heater and a bit of performance. So that's the PC and the rundown of the specs and what you get for your money, but how does that affect the performance? Well, let's compare it to a effectively modern day version of this build, one with an i5 11600K and an RTX 3060 Ti. That build would set you back, especially if you buy it from someone like Overclocks UK, somewhere around £1,500, give or take. I can't find that exact spec. They do a 10400F with a 3060 Ti, but not the 11600K. Either way, it should be around that sort of price tag, which is obviously 3x more than this one. Of course, the 11600K is also a 6-core 12-thread chip, which with faster boost clocks and generally clock speeds in general, and IPC improvements, and so it's 66% faster just in single-threaded workloads in Cinebench. And it is a shocking 200% faster in multi-threaded, again in Cinebench. In fact, it's not far off just 2 of the cores from the new chip being faster than all 4 in this one. If you're planning on doing any level of content creation with a machine like this, it's probably not going to be fantastic for you. Looking at the Blender numbers in the BMW scene, it took 619 seconds, or around 10 minutes, compared to the new i5, well, that took more like 3.5. And in Gooseberry, it's much worse. That took 55 minutes to render instead of around 18 with the new i5. And I'll throw up the results from the Puget bench suites for Adobe Premiere, After Effects, and Photoshop. But suffice to say that, well, this isn't the best experience you could have if those sorts of tasks are what you're after. But Andrew, this is a gaming PC. That's what you'd buy this for, let's be honest. So how does it perform in games? Well, that's where it gets interesting. Now, for the sake of comparison, I'm going to be running the games and the benchmarks at 1080p at ultra settings. That's not what I would recommend you run on this system. I would call this a 1080p low-medium type system, especially for more demanding games, maybe medium to high on lighter, more esports titles. But basically, it kind of performs okay. Now, starting with Watch Dogs Legion, it averages out 28 FPS on average here and around 20 FPS in the 1% lows. That's obviously not amazing, and I probably wouldn't want to play at 20 FPS average, but again, it's important to note that that's on ultra settings, and Watch Dogs Legion is a game that is very difficult to run, so getting 28 FPS average isn't too bad. In CSGO, you get a very respectable 118 FPS average, even on high settings, although unfortunately that doesn't really tell the story of how it feels to play, as the 1% low figure kind of shows you. That's only 41 FPS on those 1% lows, and I'll be honest, the playing experience was pretty choppy and pretty, well, laggy and stuttery overall. And then there's Cyberpunk. Yeah, this is a very difficult game to run. It is already pretty difficult. Even the 3060 Ti and an 11600K only got 78 FPS average at just 1080p on ultra settings. So this system getting 26 average actually, again, isn't too bad. I would still definitely run this system and that game on low if you want to play Cyberpunk, but it is definitely possible, and so that's a very good sign. In FORTNITE, even at epic settings, it was actually pretty playable. I didn't really have too many problems with it. It averaged 64 FPS with 43 on the 1% lows, which sure, the new build does run 191 FPS average, which is basically 200% more performance. But again, if you drop this system to more like medium, you're going to have a very good time with it. You're easily going to be hitting 60 FPS on the minimums and pushing upwards towards 144 FPS if you want to use a higher refresh rate display. That trend should continue across most of those sorts of esports titles like FORTNITE and CSGO, but also things like League of Legends and Valorant, Dota, any of those sorts of titles, this system will be perfect for. And finally, Microsoft Flight. You are reading that right. Yes, that does say 13.5 FPS average. It is already a very difficult game to run, even on the 3060 Ti and 11600K. That only manages 43 FPS average. So I'll just leave it at that. This is probably a game that you wouldn't want to play on the system full stop. Even on low settings, I think it might struggle, but I'm sure you could give it a go. So if you can't buy a new GPU right now, should you go and buy a used PC instead? Well, I think it will depend on your situation. If you've already got a full gaming PC and you're just waiting for that graphics card, then obviously this probably isn't the best suited choice for you. Maybe just buying a used graphics card might be a better shout. But if you're just getting into PC gaming, or if you have a really, really old system, older than this one, one that can't play games, then sure, give these a look. It's not perfect, but it will get you playing games, at least at 1080p at 60 FPS, or in those more esports titles, even pushing to higher refresh rates. If you've got a bit more cash to spend, then you can buy a new system from someone like Overclockers UK. Again, affiliate links in the description below. Those guys sell a even RTX 3070 PC within an in-stock graphics card, as they have build stock rather than standard, in-box stock, and those are available. You could buy them right now, and it would set you back around sort of £1,500 for that RTX 3070 system, or you could spend a little bit less on an RTX 3060 Ti, but either way, you're looking at about 3x more money. But in a lot of games, especially at ultra settings, you do get 3x more performance, so if you're willing to spend more, there is some options right now. But if you're looking to just get into gaming, something that's nice and cheap, not too expensive, then yeah, give Chris a message. He's on our Discord under either Duragamer or under number2fanchris. Feel free to ping a message in the tech sales chat if you like. Our Discord is linked in the description below, and you can chat about, well, purchasing a PC. As I mentioned, if I was gonna build or buy the system myself, then I would probably splash out on a better hard drive, or either possibly even just a single large SSD instead. It may cost a little bit more, but in the long run, especially in terms of just innate usability, that will definitely be worth it. If I was building this system and I had a touch more cash, maybe 600 or 700, I think I would personally splash out for a slightly newer, maybe Intel or maybe early Ryzen CPU, depending on what I'm after, so that I can get DDR4 compatibility, so that it's then easier to upgrade the CPU later. If you do happen to go on the Ryzen side of things, then you could also get much easier upgradability, as anything from 1st gen Ryzen to now 5th gen Ryzen with appropriate BIOS updates can actually be supported on a wide number of their boards without having to upgrade your motherboard or RAM, so it's just a CPU drop-in. So again, that might be a good shout, but you are venturing into the slightly higher price territories there, so I'll leave that one to you. So there you have a look at a used PC. I hope the video has given you enough information to hopefully understand if buying one of these is right for you or not. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. Would you buy a used PC like this, buy a brand new one from someone like Overclockers or any of the other system integrators? Or would you save for a new GPU on its own, or just stick with what you got instead? Feel free to let me know in the comments down below. There's also a load of links in the description you can check out, including the ones that I mentioned, like the Overclockers UK system and the Crucial SSD. Both of those are affiliate links. One will obviously take you to Overclockers, another one will take you to your local Amazon store. There's also a load of other links in the description you can check out, from merch, hoodies, or t-shirts like this one. This is a nice way to get close to a GPU without actually forking out the cash. This is a sort of RTX 2060 I designed in Blender myself. Also, there is Patreon for access to our Money Men Discord chat and sponsor-free videos, and of course you support my my comedy directly, and there's a lot of other stuff, so feel free to check it out. There will be some more videos on the end cards. I'll leave Chris's Discord username in the description as well if you want to DM him instead. But yeah, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you on the next video.